Hello, my name is Theo Venter and we're busy with our regular YouTube recordings. And today my guest is Professor Raymond Parsons, well-known member of the Northwest-University Business School. And today we're going to talk about the medium-term policy statement that was delivered last week by Minister Tito Mboweni. But Raymond, before we start with a mini budget, which it's also known as, we had a wonderful experience over the weekend with our sports team, the Springboks, winning the World Cup for the third time. And I heard jokingly people saying, well, we delivered Brexit better than Johnson did. Do you think that this major event has any economic impact? Does it, would people now start investing now that we've won the World Cup?
Hi, Theo. Look, I think the winning formula for our rugby was a wonderful experience. And the question is, can we transfer that success onto the economic front? And certainly there are some lessons that we can draw in how we tackle our economic challenges. For example, the question of cohesion, the question of discipline, the question of excellence, and ultimately of delivery, a success, a win. And we must see whether we can transfer those qualities into how we now tackle not only our economic problems, but the fiscal challenges we face, and also, of course, the message from Moodys, which is not a positive one.
Yeah, well, you brought us back to what we're actually talking to, and that is the mini budget and Moodys and so on. It was my impression listening to Tito Mboweni last week that it was kind of a speech that was delivered to scare people, to bring about the enormity or the depth of the economic challenges we're facing. Is that a correct interpretation?
I think it was important for the Minister and the National Treasury to put the facts, to put the economic and fiscal facts on the table, to say this is what we are facing, this is the magnitude of our economic challenge, of our debt challenge, and in fact, to say our challenge now, to put it in a sentence, is how do we break out of a low growth trap without falling into a debt trap? That's the overall challenge. And he spelled out very candidly and frankly, and I thought importantly, what these facts were that needed to be shared with the nation as a whole, because quite clearly there's going to have to be collective action in order to turn this economy around.
Yeah, and we'll of course find out more in 2020 with the budget. This was just the mini budget to get us from here to there. But within 2 days of the mini budget, 3 days, we had Moody's statement. There was a lot of speculation that we'll be downgraded to junk. But eventually we were only downgraded by 1 notch, and Moody's gave us a stern warning to basically look after the economy in a better way.
Well, I think we have to clarify the situation. There was never going to be a downgrade last weekend. That's not the way these credit agencies work. They first give you a warning. In other words, that the so-called traffic light goes from green to amber and says, proceed with caution. We want you to do certain things. But the fact that Moodys, which has always been very optimistic about South Africa, given us the benefit of the doubt.
They're sympathetic to us.
Absolutely. The fact that they've said, look, we think we now have to change our outlook from stable to indeed negative, means that we have to use the next year very wisely through the budget, through the investment conference that's taking place this week, to use them as building blocks to avoid being brought down to junk status by Moodys later on. And the other important point which needs to be noted, why was there such a negative reaction to what the minister said in his mini budget when he was simply putting the facts out? I think the negativity came from the fact that the remedies did not seem to match the magnitude of the problem he was sketching. And I think that gap, that was the confidence gap that led the markets, other commentators, and even Moodys to take a somewhat negative view of the message of the mini budget.
Yeah, and interestingly, looking from a political angle, where I usually sit, it sounded to me in the speech that he's not talking to South Africa in general. He's talking to the ANC. He's actually talking to his own supporters within the tripartite alliance, because a lot of the difficulties and comments afterwards were negative from within. One would have expected the ANC to now follow a line or a single strategic direction, but that's clearly not the case if one were to look at e-tolls and those kind of things.
Well, I think the point here is that, and I think this is the risk, the political risk that has been identified here, that if I can put it this way, that the gross domestic politics is trumping the gross domestic product, in the sense that it is not at all sure, and this is what comes out in the Moodys narrative, not sure that there is the political will there to do even the things that were revealed and announced in the mini budget. There are processes, we've brought procrastination up to a fine art, but now it's beginning to cost the country. And that is reflected very clearly in what was said by Moodys about the economy and what they expect us to do over the next few months or up to a year.
Well, you mentioned the investment conference that takes place later this week. What are your expectations? This is the second one that is actually hosting, bringing in foreign direct investment, encouraging local investors to invest. Where would you pitch?
Well, I pitch it in two ways. The first is that I'm hoping some of the spirit of our rugby win will rub off onto this investment summit. That's important. But equally, that the message of Moodys is also taken on board and will inject urgency into this second investment summit by showing concrete projects, concrete infrastructure, strong commitments, and also, above all, accountability as to what has happened since the last investment conference. What are the lessons that we need to take on board? What have we succeeded in implementing, and what have we not succeeded in implementing? And that is a very important message that needs to come out of this investment summit as one of the building blocks, other than the budget next year, which hopefully can lead us to turn the economy around and avoid a downgrade next year.
Now, in summary, we will probably have a growth rate of approximately 0.5% this year, if I look at the statistics all over. What are your expectations economically for 2020? We will have another program where we're going to look a little bit in the longer term, but in this program, what's your feeling? Where are we going?
Well, I haven't yet asked Father Christmas for a new crystal ball, so I'll have to use the present one, which is still a bit cracked given everything that's happened. I think we've got to understand it's going to be a tough year next year. Whether you're in business, whether you're a consumer, unemployed or employed, it's going to be tough. But the important point that comes out of whether it's the investment conference, whether it's Moodys or a successful world rugby outcome, we've got to capitalize on this now in ensuring that we take the right decisions, not just talk about them, but above all, be able to say to the nation, you can build new hopes on the fact that we are implementing what we've said we will do. We will restructure. We will turn the economy around. We will create jobs. In other words, this rather unfortunate equation of low growth, high unemployment, low tax revenues, and high debt, we will break this mold next year. We will begin to break it in ways that will build confidence and get the growth rate and the employment that the South Africa needs. We need job-rich growth sooner rather than later, and that's the message that we've got to put out to the nation as to what we want to do in 2020.
Raymond, thank you very much for this very interesting discussion, and I hope in our next one we will take a much broader look and bring the politics, the economics, and everything else into the same picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.